Hi, everybody. Welcome to Promise Day. Now, this is actually our second event. We'll have some highlights from the first event ready soon, but this is our spring 2021. This is part of our sexual assault awareness event in conjunction with the Student Government Association and with Title IX. And we're really grateful to have such a cooperative with them, with the wellness services, with the police, because this is about empowering Eagles. The Wake Tech Eagles, this is a foundation for your life. It helps you get the resources you need to be successful and to build a successful community. So even if you've not been a victim of sexual assault, please pay attention, because these are resources you can share down the line with someone. It is statistically impossible to not have met someone who has experienced sexual assault, whether they tell you about it or not. And if you want some examples to look at, think about the fact that in 2014, we had Gamergate, where the female game designers were being harassed and sexually harassed and having their lives threatened, all through digital media. In 2018, reports came in that 1 in 5 young women under the age of 25 had received some type of sexual harassment via text, Facebook post, Instagram, etc., from any of these different digital media devices. So it's impossible to get away from it, even if it's not in person, because that device, whether it's your iPad, your laptop, or your cell phone, is in your hands. And so a lot of you are wondering, well, what can this help me? How can I learn anything from today's event? We're going to talk about some of the resources both on campus and off campus. And there are a lot of resources out there. Promise Day has been producing sexual assault and domestic violence awareness events since 2017. And we want to, Professor Paige Roseman and I want to invite students who are interested in helping plan future events to contact us. With the psychology department, we would love to help empower Eagles further and have your guidance and insight. Now, for those of you who are currently here for extra credit, in the comments section, go ahead and put in your name. We've promised the various professors who are offering that we would collect the names and give them to them after. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Roseman, but for now, do me a favor, take some notes, listen, learn, and absorb, and get an idea of the resources that are out there, because this is all about helping you be your best self so that you can then turn around and build the best community. And Professor Roseman, if you'll take over, please.
Thanks so much, Professor McIlvaney. So I have the privilege of introducing a couple of different campus resources, and we'll get started today with Lieutenant Charlie Core. So Lieutenant Core has been with the Wake Tech Campus Police since 2012 as a patrol officer, detective, and in his current position as administrative and investigations lieutenant. He comes to us with a vast amount of experience, including working for Florida schools, serving with NC State, and also serving for 20 years as part of the New York City Police Department. Lieutenant Core has been with us since the very start of these Promise Day events, and we're really grateful to have him. So I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Paige, and thank you to everyone who's attending. So I'm just going to speak about if a student were to be a victim of a sexual assault on campus, I would investigate the incident and arrest the suspect if that's what the victim wished to do. Not all victims initially wish to pursue criminal charges, and that's okay. Sometimes that comes down the road, but we will do what the victim wants, and I think that's very important. The victim's name and information are kept confidential. There is one little caveat to that. If the assault were to pose a threat to the campus community, we are mandated to give out certain information about what occurred and safety advice to the campus community, but that would not include any information at all about the victim. If a student were to be sexually assaulted off campus, we would assist that student if that's what they wished. We would connect them with the agency where the crime occurred, because they are the ones, due to jurisdictional issues, that have to investigate the crime. In either case, we'll assist the student in obtaining services on campus, with some of those being Title IX, the wellness counselor, and student services. And in addition, we will also provide special parking, escorts, and pretty much anything that we could do to help the student feel safe on campus during this most difficult of time. And lastly, if you were to be a victim of a sexual assault, or if you have a friend who was a victim of a sexual assault, I can't urge you enough to help yourself or help them. Get some assistance. The assistance is here at Wake Tech to help you. It is a very difficult process to go from a victim to become a survivor. And I don't know if it's impossible to do it on your own, but I think it's very, very difficult to do it on your own. And in the long run, you'd be better off getting help. So thank you again for including me on these important issues.
Thank you so much, Charlie. We really appreciate it. And thank you for speaking to the ways in which we can all step up as individuals and as friends, looking out for each other in community. Next up, I'll introduce Elaine Rodriguez. She is our wellness counselor, has a counterpart, Amanda Allen, as well. Elaine is primarily on the North Campus and once a week at Perry Health. Elaine is a licensed clinical social worker and has been with Wake Tech since November 2019. Before joining Wake Tech, Elaine worked for an employee assistance program as well as an outpatient counseling programs for teens and for young adults. Thanks for being with us, Elaine.
Thank you, Paige, for the introduction, and hello, thank you everyone for joining us today. I am here to discuss wellness services on campus. So as Lieutenant Core had mentioned, we do have help available for you. If you or anyone you know is struggling, needs help, I want you to know that it is a sign of strength, not weakness, to reach out. Now, we have 2 full-time wellness counselors at Wake Tech, as Paige mentioned, myself and Amanda Allen. Right now, we're meeting with students for virtual appointments, but very soon we will be transitioning to in-person appointments as needed with safety protocols in place, of course. You can schedule an appointment with us by visiting our website. That's wellness.waketech.edu. And then you can also send an email to our general inbox, and that's wellness@waketech.edu. We're available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. These sessions are confidential, not a part of your academic record. We do have some disclosure requirements, which we would go over with you in depth at the time of your appointment, similar to with Lieutenant Core when there are safety concerns involved, immediate safety concerns. So if you do have any questions or would like to schedule an appointment, please contact us. And thank you again so much.
Thank you, Elaine. And next up, I'm going to go ahead and introduce 2 of our Title IX investigators who are on the call, Chris Ross and Anthony Garnes. So both have been with us here at Wake Tech since 2013. Chris currently serves as the Director of Benefits and has more than 23 years of progressive experience in human resources. Since she moved to North Carolina, Chris has worked at IBM and with some state of North Carolina agencies, including the Department of Health and Human Services and the North Carolina Community College Systems Office. So here at Wake Tech, she manages the benefits department, serves as a Title IX investigator, and is a part-time instructor. So we're really excited to have Chris with us. And I'll go ahead and introduce Anthony as well before I turn it over. Anthony also joined us here at Wake Tech in 2013 and currently serves as a recruitment and outreach officer and a Title IX investigator. He has over 15 years of recruitment experience in the private, government, and public sectors. Prior to joining Wake Tech, Anthony has worked for several private colleges in recruitment, international student affairs, and admissions. He started his recruitment experience as a sergeant in the Army and was an Army recruiter right after returning from a deployment in Iraq in 2004. So we're delighted to welcome Chris and Anthony.
Hello, thank you all for having us. It is our pleasure to participate every year in Promise Day. I want to go ahead and get started with the presentation. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So for those of you that are not familiar with Title IX, it might be something new to you, might be your first introduction to what Title IX is, or even the term Title IX. But the Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972 prohibits the discrimination on the basis of sex in any federally funded education program or activity. Title IX is mandated by the Office of Civil Rights, also known as OCR, in the U.S. Department of Education. All schools receiving federal funds or provide federal financial aid to students must adhere to Title IX. So a lot of what you all are going to hear today is like we had Lieutenant Cora talked about the more so of the judicial side of the law enforcement. So Title IX investigators in our process does not have anything to do or any ramifications criminally. So our process is internal within the means of the Wake Tech community, and it is purely administrative. Our main objective as a Title IX investigator, or the Title IX policy at Wake Tech, is to remedy any situations that a student may be having, maybe something that happened off campus and it might have spilled over to on campus. But our main objective is to eliminate any road barriers you all are having as students and making sure you can be the best student you can be. Next slide, please. So the goals of this session, we'll talk about Wake Tech's jurisdiction. We'll talk a little bit about what is cyber abuse, resources and services, and then our contact information as well. Next slide, please. So Wake Tech's jurisdiction applies to the educational program or activities of the college. It could take place on the campus or on property owned or controlled by the college. It can also take place, or we have control over a college sponsored or events, or in buildings owned or controlled by the college's recognized student organizations. Also, more importantly, as of last spring, a lot of our events, what we're doing, classes, have completely went to virtual platforms. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. The respondent must be a member of the college's community in order for its policies to apply. And what we mean by respondent, they need to be a student of Wake Tech. You need to be currently taking classes at Wake Tech as the respondent. This policy can also be applicable to the effects of off-campus misconduct that effectively deprive someone of access to the college's educational program. So remember when I talked about earlier in the first slide about some things may happen on campus, off campus, that might spill over into on-campus events, inside the classroom, those type of things. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yes, we do try our best to remedy situations in an administrative way on our side, making sure if a respondent, also known as a victim, reports an incident, that we do our best to, especially if that respondent / victim is sharing a class, sharing a student space with that person being accused of something, we want to make sure we separate that instantaneously. So that's one of our first actions that we actually take in the process before the investigation even starts. Again, our main concern is to make sure our students feel safe coming on campus or participating in virtual environments. Next slide, please. So what is cyber abuse? Cyber abuse is an emerging form of abuse that includes online harassment, online bullying, non-consensual sharing of intimate images online, sexual extortion, and cyber stalking. So let's rewind back to when COVID-19 happened last March. I can't remember, it's the first or second week in March that we completely shut the college down and we transitioned. This is like literally after you all got back from spring break, we went completely virtual. So we were able to go in and you are using Microsoft Teams for your classroom sessions. You might have been using Twitter for group chats. They have a group meet chat. Obviously, Blackboard is where your course shells are. Any other online virtual platform that you might be doing, working with projects with, anything you could possibly think of that is Wake Tech related, that is also covered in Title IX. All right. So a lot of us, if you're already familiar with Title IX, you may think of athletics. So you may think of something happening on campus or maybe in a dorm room or something like that. But no, a lot of stuff, especially in the virtual environment, this stuff is covered under Title IX. It is covered under Title IX. Next slide, please. So when is the cyber abuse considered severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive? We cited the case studies below with the article that we used from endtechabuse.org. And these are some of the things that have been found when cases have been cited. It's hard to say this, but here's what the courts have looked at. Content and frequency of the online messaging. Number of individuals involved, the relationship between the victim and the abusers, and any in-person verbal, sexual, or physical abuse accompanying the online conduct. Impact the conduct has on the victim as well. So these are several areas that are weighed when considering quote-unquote cyber abuse, right? Simple acts of teasing or name calling, even if targeting gender differences, are not enough to render the school liable or failing to respond. Now, we must point that out because it is noted in the student handbook, but I don't want you all to feel like you cannot report something because you're unsure. If you're unsure and you're experiencing, whether it could be anything, whatever type of negative experience you're having in a virtual environment, we want you to come and talk to somebody, okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be Lieutenant Core. We have wellness counselors that are present today in this session. You'll learn about additional resources throughout this presentation. But we do ask for you to talk to somebody that you trust, okay, about what has happened to you. All right. That is one of the primary things. Of course, we have to go over this information in the slide because it's cited legal casework. But I don't want this to deter anybody from actually reaching out and say, oh, well, they can't do anything about it. I don't never want anybody to think of that. We'll be providing, Chris will be providing her information. I'll be providing my contact information on the following upcoming slides. But I don't want you to feel like you don't have anybody at Wake Tech to help you and guide you through this process. Again, before I carry it over to Chris, I want to just drum that beat again about saying that we are here to help you and make sure that you can go to class, feel safe, feel comfortable when you're either attending an online class or whether it's an in-person class. And I'll have Chris take over from here.
All right, now that you've heard a lot about what Title IX does, what we're responsible for, when to possibly report, the next slide we'll be speaking about who the Title IX members are. So we do have responsibilities as a team. And of course, you have your Title IX compliance and oversight, which is handled by our Title IX coordinator, Laura Bethay. Also for compliance and support, this is for HR and student conduct. That's Title IX Deputy Coordinator Benita Clark, who's a VP of Human Resources. Also Title IX Deputy Coordinator will be Karen Finney over the student conduct side. Also Title IX investigators, you've heard from Anthony, myself, Chris Ross. I am located on the Southern campus, just to let you know. Kathy Reeves, she's also located on the Southern Wake campus. And then Paul Jenkins, I believe he's on North campus at this time. We also have our hearing and appeal process. And we have 4 staff members as advisors, and then 4 staff and faculty members as hearing officers. So again, 4 staff and faculty as advisors, and 4 staff and faculty as hearing officers. So this is your Title IX team here at Wake Tech. In our next slide, we'll go through some of the resources. You've already heard from several today, to include Elaine and Amanda, wellness counselors, also our campus police, Charlie Core and his team. Also keep in mind, safety is first. So we want to make sure that we're also making sure that these contacts are here for you. At the same time, we'll go over the policy here. I won't go through it in detail in the next slide, but while we're on this particular slide, I want to make sure I point out the policy and how to get to it. We'll provide it also in the chat. And the Get Help, which is actually the form that we'll be going through also. I've already talked about the wellness leaders. For staff and faculty, though, as a benefits representative, I also want to make sure that we point out our CompSci EAP program, in addition to the wellness side that we have here with the college. Again, CompSci is our EAP provider. And again, it's also called Guidance Resources. I don't want to confuse anybody, but it's CompSci Guidance Resources. There's your website and web ID. Again, it's for our staff and our faculty. I want to go in detail with a little bit with the policy in the next slide. It is a very detailed policy, it's pretty long, so I want to make sure that you actually have access to it, which you do on our Wake Tech website. But this is just a screenshot of the policy. Again, we'll put the link in the chat. But with the policy, if you have some time, please take a look at that policy. I want to also point out that Get Help. It's in red right on the screen when you actually log into our Title IX site page. That will take you directly to our complaint form. So the screenshot you see to the right is the complaint form. This is where all the details that we need as your Title IX team, this is where the process starts. We need as much detail as possible. As you can see also in red, anonymous submissions are accepted. So as you can see, which may be a little small for you, but that is not a required field at the top where the information regarding you yourself as the reporting party has to submit information. But I do want to make sure that all details are included in that form. And again, your Title IX investigators, that is what we need to make sure we have as much detail as possible to get started with the process, and also making sure that it applies to Title IX in that case. So this form is where you will enter all the information needed. Again, that red Get Help icon right on the policy page will take you directly to this form. And this is not just for those who are directly involved in the process. Maybe you're a bystander and you want to report something. That is there for you also. So that's where sometimes we have the anonymous submissions that are accepted. Anything you want to add to that, Anthony, before?
Yes. So, as Chris mentioned about submitting anonymously, so that goes for the, bystanders, the saying, see something, if you see something, say something. This is your say something, right? So you can submit anonymously. This form also allows you, if you have, maybe if you have a report or a write-up that you want to submit explaining exactly what you saw as a witness, or maybe as a witness or a victim, you also can attach. So you can attach screenshots, especially in we're themed along cyber abuse. So if you have screenshots of something, text messages, images, maybe you saw something that was said about somebody else, or you saw a picture that was shared by somebody else that was offensive. You can screenshot that and share that, and actually put that as a JPEG or a PNG file, and attach it to the form as well. So whether you're a person that witnessed something or you're the actual victim, try to be as detailed as possible. If you can provide as a victim, if you can provide your information, it is helpful, because we do we do want to reach out to the victim and make sure we have a better understanding specifically about what happened, but it's not required. It is not required. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. All right. Now it's time for questions. I believe my next slide actually has a question for Q&A. If there are any questions.
And just to note, just while we wait for questions to come in, once that form is submitted, it goes to our Title IX. It goes to the student conduct office, and then it gets routed to the Title IX office, where our Title IX actually assigns investigators. So during that process, once we actually assign investigators, both parties, so the claimant, the person actually who filed the report, or also known as the victim, and then also the responder, the person actually being accused, they are both notified. Because remember what we talked about earlier, this is an administrative process, and during an administrative process, we have to maintain equity in the process and making sure we notify both individuals. Now, as far as the incident being anonymous, none of that information is divulged when we're sending information, that letter to the respondent. Okay, so just to let everybody know that we do notify and let them know that we want to reach out to them and let them know that we would need to discuss any matter at hand based on the claim.
Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Well, if there are any further questions, I'll be watching the chat just to make sure that we can actually answer those. If not, please feel free to enter those. I'm not sure who they're submitted to later in case you just don't want to chat now. But thank you again for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Anthony and Chris. We really appreciate it. I love that you brought up too that idea of looking out for each other, not being a bystander, and creating safety together. So next up, I wanted to go ahead and introduce some folks. So I'm going to start with Bex Orton, and they'll let us know a little bit about Interact. And if you were here with us last week, you heard from Charisse Potts, and you heard everything from wonderful data to also like really helpful, practical everyday tips for creating healthy relationships, consent, setting healthy boundaries. And we're going to continue that conversation today, just more applicable to the digital world, right? Into this online space that we share. And I'll go ahead and introduce Bex, Chloe, and Neha. Y'all can take it over.
Great, thank you so much. So, hey everyone. I am sorry that I can't turn my camera on today. I unfortunately am having a really strong reaction to having my eyes dilated at the optometrist this morning. So I'm keeping my camera off, but you'll be able to see Chloe and Neha when they take over for our facilitation. So just a quick introduction to Interact in case you were not in the presentation with Charisse. So a little bit about who I am. I am the education specialist at Interact. I also work with our sexual assault services team. So if you were ever to need to reach out to Interact, I could be one of the people who is a case manager for you if you were to want to engage in any of our services. And I think just like your Title IX coordinators were talking about, Interact is another resource for you. So if you are interested in any of our services or have questions, you are welcome to visit our website. You can also give us a call at our 24/7 hotline. The number is up top along that banner. So that's staffed 24/7. You're always welcome to give us a call. We have a place called the Solace Center that is able to perform sexual assault evidence collection kits. Those are sometimes called rape kits. But what they're doing is they are collecting evidence for if you decide to make a police report and want to move forward with that process for law enforcement. You are also welcome to get a sexual assault evidence collection kit completed, even if you are not sure that you want to make a police report. But if you have questions about any of that or anything, you're always welcome to give us a call. We're always, happy to answer questions or to help. And we want you to get connected with our services if you need them. So just a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to stop talking soon, and then our two peer educators are going to take over. Chloe and Neha are both part of the Interact Peer Educator Program, which is a group of teenagers and young adults who work with me to do presentations in the community and have conversations about healthy relationships and dating violence, other forms of interpersonal violence. So the session that we're going to be doing for y'all today is interactive. So Chloe and Neha will give you all the instructions, but we're going to be using Google Jamboard to get some thoughts from y'all. So hopefully you're familiar with that. If not, they'll kind of tell you how to do that. You can also go ahead and grab something to write with. You're welcome to take notes on a computer or on your phone, or get a piece of paper to have that ready. So I'll just give you that little heads up so that you're ready to go. Chloe, Neha, is there anything else I should introduce before y'all get started? Or does that seem like a good spot to hand it over to you?
I think we're good.
Good to go? Okay, great. All right, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and get started. So for today's lesson, we're pretty much just going to be focusing on values, boundaries, and consent, and the relationship between those three things, with a specific focus on how that all relates to technology. But before we start, I do want to give a bit of a content warning for our discussion today. We are going to be talking about some potentially triggering topics like physical, sexual, and emotional violence. So if at any time you do feel uncomfortable, please feel free to take a moment to yourself, whether that be leaving for a moment or muting the camera, just to really make sure that you're feeling comfortable. Everything you say today will be kept confidential, so please don't feel like you have to disclose anything about yourself that you don't want to. With that being said, we are going to start with an icebreaker just to start off on a lighter note, and we're pretty much just going to be answering a question, and you guys can feel free to answer this in the chat. And that question is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? So just take a moment and think about that, and you guys can answer it in the chat. And I guess I can also answer for myself out loud. For me, I think that I would like teleportation.
I love that one, Neha. I think I would also definitely, just as as an example, as people are starting to think about theirs, I think I would either do like flight or teleportation. Definitely something having to do with easier travel. That would be mine.
Yeah, I think the reading minds one seems kind of popular.
I think one I would personally like, super strength.
Yeah, also a lot of people are saying teleportation, invisibility. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of different answers in the chat, and you guys can feel free to keep on going as I speak. But with all of these different superpowers, what might the superpower that each of us chose say about our own values? And you guys can answer that as well, but I'll also give an example. Me, I chose teleportation, and when I kind of reflect on that, I think that maybe the reason why I chose that is because I really value just being very practical and being very efficient. So I think that that says a lot about me. So if you guys maybe think about that and put that in the chat as well, that'd be great.
I can offer an example as well. I think one reason why I chose strength is because I really value independence and resilience. And I think that goes along with super strength really well.
And I think it can definitely be kind of tough to make that connection between like a superpower and a value. But I think that it is really interesting to kind of reflect and think about how different elements of ourselves might reflect on our values and what we prioritize. So you guys can continue to think about that, but we are going to move on to another activity where we're actually going to start defining our values. But first, we need to make sure we know what exactly a value is. And all values are basically things that you believe in that are important in the way that you live, and they are what determine your priorities. So for instance, if you really value adventure, then you might set aside time in your life to go outside on the weekends and do fun activities that stimulate that sense of adventure. And this is important to take in consideration because if you act against your values, of course, you're going to end up unhappy and feeling dissatisfied. So in order to prevent those feelings, we want to first identify what exactly we want to protect within ourselves. So with this activity, I'm going to set a timer for about 3 minutes, and I want you guys to look through this list of values that's being shared right now and just write down a couple that really resonate with you and that you feel are very important to you. And that can be either on a piece of paper or on your phone. And we'll check back in a couple minutes and see where we're at with that. Okay, so I think that was about 2 minutes. So I see that some of you have already done this, but if you feel comfortable, feel free to share some of your values in the chat. I also want to note that I have been reading through the chat responses, and there's some really, really like introspective and reflective connections between that superpower icebreaker and values. So thank you everyone for that. So yeah, I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to do that, and then we're going to move on to our next activity.
These are awesome. I think please feel free to keep adding your values in the chat. We might go ahead and move on to our next activity. But I'm loving reading everyone's kind of exploration about their identity and what their values are. So now that we've talked a little bit about values and determined some of what they might be, we're going to talk about what your values are and how they relate to setting boundaries. So your values are the things you want to protect and how you want to live out your life comfortably and happily. And your boundaries are the guidelines for how you want to protect those values. So your values that you maybe just discovered can help you make decisions about what boundaries you want and what are you going to protect. So if everyone could grab a piece of paper and a writing utensil, we're going to be doing a writing activity. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds, a minute or so to go grab those materials. And if someone could let me know when they're ready in the chat, that'd be awesome. Great, I'm seeing a couple readies. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Go ahead and grab that if you haven't yet. But what we're going to be doing is, now that we've laid a foundation for how your values relate to your boundaries, we're going to practice an experience where a person might violate your boundaries. And this game relates to technology's role in relationships specifically, which is something more common in COVID, since we're online all the time and we're interacting with our partners and our friends online really often. So this game is going to illustrate maybe how a boundary can be pushed and consent can be broken digitally or through a phone. So I want everyone to grab their notebook, paper, and a utensil. And what we're going to do is we're going to write, I have the right to a healthy relationship. And I'm going to ask you to repeat that sentence over and over until you hear this sound. Would be, can you guys see that okay? That really annoying buzzer sound. Yeah. So I want you just to continue to write, I have the right to a healthy relationship, and then keep repeating it. But every time that you hear the buzzer, you must stop wherever you are in that sentence and go to the next column below and start rewriting it over again. Does that make sense? Yeah? All right. So I'm going to count down, and every time you hear the buzzer, stop what you're doing and write, I have the right to a healthy relationship over again. So we're going to go 3, 2, 1, go. And we will stop there because I just got out of my phone. But we're going to stop there. So how did that, does anybody on the camera, if anybody participated, want to share what their writing looks like? Okay, so it looks like a lot of, you got maybe one full sentence and then a lot of shorter fragments of the phrase. Anybody in the chat want to share how that activity made them feel? Or what some emotions came up maybe while completing it? Pressured.
Chloe, I can share too. I was doing the activity on my side of things, and it made me just feel really stressed and kind of frustrated to not be able to complete what I was doing. And definitely, it started making me feel kind of like my handwriting got messier, and it just, you know, it definitely kind of like was messing with my like sense of focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that reiterated in the chat as well. Everyone's feeling pressured and rushed, which is not a great feeling for sure. None of them are. Yeah, so the way we kind of wanted to relate this to an experience of when your boundaries are being pushed is you can think of those buzzes like they were text messages that were distracting you. That could have been a partner who was constantly texting texting you with harassing texts. And it's hard to focus on anything else when you're maybe hearing that ding of the phone over and over. And this is how it feels when someone uses technology to cross boundaries and violate your personal space and your personal time. So I have a scenario for you guys that you can answer in the chat. So, imagine that it's late at night and you're getting tons of texts from someone and you're starting to get super uncomfortable and stressed and frustrated that they keep expecting you to respond. what would you do?
Chloe, while we're waiting for people to respond, I also think that this activity is also just kind of showing how we might not think of texting as being like a way to control somebody, but thinking about how distracting and how frustrating those buzzer sounds were. To me, that is a really clear demonstration of how like someone texting you all the time, someone being in your DMs all the time can actually be a way to control you because it's taking your focus away from what you are actually trying to do for yourself. And it's not giving you the time or space to focus on the values that you actually have. So I see some people are starting to comment in the chat now in response to your first question. So I'll stop there.
Great. So yeah, Bex, that was a really great way to say it. And a lot of people are saying that they might block the person, turn their phone off, kind of step away from the situation, which I think is probably a good idea. And I would say one thing always good to do in a situation like this is to communicate your boundary. So that might say, I think it was Haley brought a really good said something really great in the comments saying, I stopped messaging at 10. So you could say, hi, I don't message any later than 10 p.m. So I may not respond if you text me at this time. And that's a good way to kind of place your boundary between you and that person and letting them know, I'm not going to feel obligated to respond to you every time you text me, especially late at night, as that might feel pressuring or controlling. And if that person isn't receptive to that boundary that you place, say, I don't text after 10 p.m. and they still expect you to, they may not be a great person to have a relationship, or they might just need some practice setting and respecting their own boundaries as well. That's something hard to do. And especially during COVID and using your phone, it's really easy, I think, right now to kind of push the limits and expect things of people, especially online, that weren't as common before we were always online using platforms like these and texting all the time.
I also saw, so there's a section of the chat that is with just the presenters, and I saw that Professor McElvaney also put in there about it kind of depends on how important the relationship is, about if you're going to respond or not. And so I think that that's another important part of this to consider, is that it might be really easy to block somebody who you don't have a very deep relationship with, but thinking about what would be the impact of someone texting you all the time, if that was a person that you were dating, or if that was a person that you had a really close friendship with, just thinking about how it might be harder to set those boundaries. And that's okay. That's part of why we're having this conversation as kind of an introduction to thinking about how to set boundaries and to thinking about what do your boundaries do. And like Chloe and Neha said, your boundaries are there to help protect your values and to help you be able to feel safe and comfortable. But if you're in a relationship that's unhealthy or that's getting towards abusive, there might be a red flag of that. If you've said a boundary like Chloe just demonstrated, if you said, hey, please don't text me after this time, and they continue to do that, that might be a red flag for you that relationship is moving into unhealthy territory or even into abusive territory. Thanks, Elle. Sorry, I jumped in. Neha, are you ready to move on with your next section?
Yeah, sure. Also, what Bex just said reminded me kind of how our boundaries are different with our different relationships, and they're also very fluid, meaning that even in one relationship, they can change over time. And that's why it's really important to check in with our boundaries over time. And that's why we're next going to talk about consent, as consent is a way of checking in with other people's boundaries, but also communicating your own boundaries. And consent is officially defined as the affirmative, unambiguous, and voluntary agreement to engage in a specific sexual activity during a sexual encounter, which can be revoked at any time, meaning that it's affirmative, so it's a yes. It's unambiguous, meaning that it's very enthusiastic and very firm, and voluntary, meaning that it's not coerced in any way. I think a lot of the times we talk about consent in the context of only sexual relationships, but in reality, consent is important for really every aspect of a relationship, and that's what we're going to be talking about as we go through this activity. There are some information that we want to share regarding consent in the context of sexual relationships. Firstly, that consent cannot be forced, coerced, or given by someone who is under the age of 16 in North Carolina, someone who is asleep, or someone who is using drugs or who is intoxicated. And now we're going to actually explore consent through a Jamboard. So I think that we can share the Jamboard, but I'm also going to put the link in the chat. And it should be editable, but basically on this Jamboard, there is a slide and there's a scenario at the top of the slide, and it says, sorry, I'm just pulling it up right now. It says your partner asks you for your My Eyes Only Snapchat password, which is like a section on Snapchat that's more private than your main story on Snapchat. And there are two columns. There is examples of responses that would show consent and examples of responses that would show non-consent. And we want you guys to put some sticky notes under both columns showing examples of responses that would either be consenting or non-consenting. And you can use the sticky note feature on Jamboard to do that, which can be located in the left side of the screen. And in a couple of minutes, we'll just check in with how we're doing on that.
If you have any questions about how to use the Jamboard or any issues with accessing it, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll do our best to troubleshoot that for you. But since it's also shared on the screen, we should be able to see when other people are able to participate. So if you can't access it, that's okay too.
Okay, thank you for all those responses, and you guys can continue to add sticky notes to the chart. But looking at what we have so far, what are some observations you guys can make about the differences between these sticky notes in both of the columns? And that can be in like the word choice, in the tone, really any differences that you notice. So I'm seeing in the private chat, one comment says that certainty is one difference I see. Yeah, and that's definitely a big difference that differentiates consent and non-consent. Oftentimes there's this misconception that merely just not saying no is an example of consent, when in reality consent is always going to be the presence of a very affirmative, certain response. that isn't, confused or uncertain about the situation whatsoever. And in the chat, I see that there are other ways to say yes and no. Yeah, definitely, like, consent isn't always just a straightforward yes and no. There are other cues we need to look at in regards to enthusiasm and certainty. And yeah, I think that what Hal identified about the consent ones being very clear while the non-consent ones aren't as clear is really, really important to take into account. At any time, if we're unsure whether someone has consented or not, it's really important that we double down and check back in and make sure that we're not doing anything that can make them uncomfortable or violate their boundaries in any way. But yeah, that being said, we are now going to move on to our next activity today, where we're going to investigate what role technology might play in digital dating abuse in a video that Chloe is going to show you.
Yeah, so we're going to watch about the first 3 minutes of this video, and it's about a woman named Julia and her experience with dating violence, as well as how technology plays a role in that relationship.
My name is Avni Parekh, and in the future, we eradicate relationship violence. So I have come back to tell you, humans, stop using your tools to hurt other people. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how people are doing that. But in March of 2016, I was much younger then than I am now. Obviously, I look like I'm 16 years old myself. But in March of 2016, myself and my two co-founders for Snap Counselors, Raj Patil and Nida Sharif, shout out guys, hey, what's up? See you in India, what's up? We created Snap Counselors as a tool to reach out to teens where they are. There's millions of teenagers using Snapchat right now. Actually, Snapchat has about 10 billion video views a day. Isn't that insane? So teens are all over Snapchat. So my role in this partnership, in this initiative, is that I am a counselor, and it's my job to speak to people that are dealing with relationship abuse, the people that feel like they're alone, the people that are getting hurt by their partners. So I want to tell you about one story that sticks out in my mind, and that is the story of Yulia. So Yulia reached out to us, and this was now, since I'm from the future, this was way back in 2016. She reached out to us and she said that her partner, her boyfriend, was calling her names and telling her she was worthless, telling her that she couldn't find anyone else to love her, that nobody was going to love her ever again, that she was stupid, that she was fat, that she was ugly, and that basically she didn't deserve any happiness in life. And she reached out to us using Snapchat. She was viewing the stories that we set up that talked about relationship violence. And she said, I'm really scared in this situation, and I feel alone. And I don't want you to respond to this message because my partner checks my phone all the time. So don't respond. Now, as a counselor, that scared the beep out of me because, here's somebody in a dangerous situation and she's telling me not to reach out to her because this tool that she had that was her lifeline to me, a counselor, was also a curse. It was also the tool that her abuser used to perpetrate violence against her, to control her, to manipulate her. So sure enough, I waited for her to contact us, and the next day she sent us a 10-second video clip. Snapchat limits the video to 10 seconds. And the night before was the first time that her relationship became physically violent. And in the 10-second video clip, she showed a fresh bruise on her eye and a cut on her lip, and once again said, please don't contact me. Now, Yulia's not a unique case. I speak to about 15 Yulias and Julios every single day that are dealing with the same thing. And to me, that's really scary.
You can go ahead and stop the video right about now.
It's supposed to connect us.
Great. I think that kind of summed up Julia's story. If you guys would like to kind of share some general thoughts or reactions you had to that video, please feel free to put that in the chat.
And while we're waiting to have folks put their reactions to the video in the chat, just quickly, we wanted to circle back to address that one of the sticky notes in our consent Jamboard had flirting in the consent column. Neha, do you want to speak a little bit more to that, or do you want me to talk about it real quick?
Yeah, I can speak to it real quick. So I think as a lot of the comments were mentioning, consent is very non-ambiguous and very direct and clear. And with flirting, that isn't really the case. It's not a direct affirmation or a direct agreement. So flirting wouldn't really be considered consent. And in that case, if you were in that situation, you would have to ask your partner again to really see whether or not they're actually consenting to you looking at their Snapchat eyes only.
Great, thanks, Neha. Chloe, we can go back to your question now.
Great, yes, I'm just still looking for some comments on any thoughts or reactions people had about the video. I did see in our private chat that phones are a way to reach out, but can also be used against you. And that's a really scary reality, that it almost seems like this bittersweet tool that has its pros and cons. Yeah, I think that's a really good comment, Haley, about there seems to be these red flags along their relationship. And we noticed that, like, Yulia sent a video of when her relationship eventually became violent. So relationships don't usually start out as physically violent. They start out as great and wonderful, and you form this connection with someone. And it gets hard over time to all of a sudden realizing these red flags and realizing the abusive tactics, but then feeling like you can just leave this person who you've grown this emotional connection to. So I think that's another situation that Yulia had to deal with. That was, maybe she had had this long-standing relationship, but now she's just realizing the danger that she's almost stuck into at this point. And I also saw one question from Nisa was, where was Yulia's family? And I don't think that was addressed in the video, but another tactic that abusers sometimes use in unhealthy and violent relationships are isolation. So there was a chance that Yulia wasn't able to or didn't feel comfortable reaching out to family members, or maybe didn't have a support system, although she did have this lifeline to a counselor. But you guys are pointing out some really good red flags that might be noticeable, but also it might be easy to not pick up on them initially when you're kind of maybe in that like honeymoon stage of a great relationship before you recognize the abusive patterns.
And I think another important thing here too is that it's important for us not to just put the emphasis on the person who is being controlled or abused. Like, it's not just on that person to notice the red flags, it's also on the other person to be respectful of their dating partner's boundaries and to not be doing things that are trying to control them or assert power over them. So yeah, I think, what Chloe is talking about is this kind of like progression of unhealthy behaviors or abuse. A lot of times abuse starts as emotional abuse. And so that person is maybe going to kind of the abuser is maybe going to slowly kind of start to chip away at that other person's self-esteem, their support network, like, this comment about where is that person's family, that may start to isolate them. So I think it's also important that we put the emphasis on, the person who is actually crossing boundaries and who's making the other person feel unsafe. And of course, it can be useful to try to identify red flags and to leave a relationship early on if there are those red flags. And that's also much easier said than done. The reason why, abuse is able to function is that it can be really tricky to recognize. And there's oftentimes already an established connection of love or attraction or, some other kind of investment in that relationship that makes it really hard to leave. So Chloe, I know we're kind of getting towards the end of our facilitation, but I just want to focus. It seems like a lot of people had strong reactions to hearing some of the abuse that was described, which is totally understandable. I absolutely understand that reaction. I will actually, Sarah, if you could put the link to Love is Respect in the comment section, that is a great website for folks to check out if they want to know more about healthy and unhealthy relationships. But I think maybe if we can circle back to this aspect, this thinking about like the technology and the digital piece. So Chloe, I'll hand it back over to you, but maybe you want to talk a little bit more about, this kind of digital aspect of it.
Yeah, so one thing we saw in that example is how difficult it can be to navigate relationships through technology. And in general, the things we talked about today, which are values, boundaries, and consent, those are already challenging to determine and communicate in every relationship, but then adding that technology aspect adds a new layer of complexity. So it's important to kind of think about what your own personal values and boundaries are and make sure that you communicate them to your partners. And thank you guys all so much for sharing your thoughts in the comments. And we really appreciate you for listening to us today. But yeah, thank you.
And I know Chloe and Neha will both need to be jumping off so that they can get back to class. I am able to stick around to answer any questions. But while we have Neha and Chloe here for a little bit longer, is there any questions or anything else that y'all would like for us to address? And while we are waiting for some questions to come in, I will also say that Interact is a great resource if you are wanting to talk more about healthy or unhealthy or abusive relationships. One thing that Interact can do that's really important is that we can help you make a safety plan. And something that we're going to take into consideration as we're making a safety plan is your digital safety. So in Yulia's situation, her phone was being used to control her. Her phone was being monitored by that abusive partner, and she wasn't able to safely use that to get help. So, something that you can do is you can contact Interact, and we will help you make a plan for, something. So we'll help you make a plan for like how to turn off your location tracking services, how to, clear your browser history, things like that. We have phones that are donated to us that we can give to clients if they need like a different phone that's not connected to an abuser's phone plan or something like that. And yeah, so I think just a general kind of takeaway is that just remembering and being mindful that your phone is not always private. So just trying to be, really aware of what you are sharing with your phone, and, just trying to be mindful of that. If you are in a potentially dangerous or violent situation. The website Love is Respect also has a lot of really great resources on making safety plans and on thinking about those red flags. So I think for a lot of y'all who are asking some of those questions about red flags or other things in healthy, unhealthy, or abusive relationships, I would definitely recommend checking out Love is Respect. They also have counselors who are on call, so you can text them. You can chat them, you can also give them a call. So that's a great resource. And then I would also definitely, encourage you, just to kind of circle back to the beginning of this presentation, I would encourage you also to reach out to your on-campus resources. So, talk to that professor that you have a good relationship with, talk to a counselor, talk to your Title IX coordinator. That might also be part of your safety plan. If you have someone who is in your class or someone who's on campus with you who's not making you feel safe, making a report to Title IX, and or even if you're not making an official report, but just checking in with your Title IX office to ask them about what your options are, that could be part of your safety plan to help kind of just increase your own sense of security and safety. Either as you're choosing to try to leave that relationship, or if you've already left that relationship and are needing some more support. I'm just looking in the chat to see.
And this question from Haley is
Yeah.
actually for Title IX. They actually had to go. And then we'll get to Andy had a really good question for you, Bex. But Haley, just real fast, the longer you wait, the problem is they want to do questioning. They don't want to ever make it a one-sided conversation where we only take one person's word, because that's just not justice. We need to get all sides. So the longer you wait, the more you may have influences of friends talking to you or about it, etc. That doesn't mean don't report it. So maybe you've waited. I had a student come to me after an event, I guess Paige was it 2 years ago, where something had happened a few weeks prior. And they still went through the investigation. It's just that the longer you have between, the more outside influences can kind of alter your memory, alter their memory, etc. So time is not on your side, but it doesn't mean that you don't report it. You should still let us know it needs to be a safe environment or go to Interact, etc., because it affects a person forever. It's not like it's done when everything's finished. But Bex, if I could ask you to address, Andy asked a great question, and it's up here about Snapchat posts.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Unfortunately, I don't have like data to be able to answer that question. I do know, just from talking with the peer educators who are, teens and young people, that, they have an association with Snapchat, that it can, sometimes be used in ways, that maybe you would say something on Snapchat that you wouldn't say on a different platform. And I would definitely be curious for, folks who are participating in this session, to respond in the chat as well, if you also have that experience or that association. But, I think that from my perspective, as a case manager with Interact, there's kind of lots, it's not usually that an abuser or someone who is, doing some kind of unhealthy behaviors is limiting it only to one platform. If they are trying to be, not and exert some kind of power over someone, they are most likely going to be doing it in a couple different areas of their life, not just necessarily on, just on Snapchat or, just on a certain kind of social media platform. So I know that that's not a perfect answer to your question, but I do think that there are some platforms that I think kind of have a little bit more like built-in either security or like ways to kind of mitigate harm. And, I do think that Snapchat is one where just because there's so many different ways to engage with different users on Snapchat, that one can sometimes be, maybe have some more opportunities for harm.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention a friend of my daughter, she's in her 20s. She had a friend who was being silly and took a picture for her girlfriend. And she sent it to her, and it was on Snapchat. And she's, naked, waist up, but then she put a clown type face on it. And she sent it to her girlfriend, and then they broke up. And the girlfriend had screenshotted it. So this picture did not go away just because it was in that more fleeting setup. And the girl had screenshotted it and then pasted her the girl's real face on it, and then distributed it to everybody. So be careful, because this is where, yeah, you might be in a healthy relationship right now, but those images last. They are somewhere out there where they can get to them. So you want to, whether it's a temporary format or a more permanent format, be aware that that can come out at a later point. Just because y'all get along right now doesn't mean you always will. And so you want to protect your own safety, whether or not it's that or your phone being taken, etc. So what other questions do you have? I'm sorry, go ahead, Bex.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, this is partly why, why we start this conversation where we're talking about values, because, we totally understand and think that it's completely natural to want to have a connection with a person that you're dating or that you're flirting with. It's, I certainly don't think that there's anything wrong with wanting to send somebody pictures or have that kind of connection with them. What I do think is really important is that you remember exactly what you were just saying, that one, those might not be always shared in a way that you feel comfortable with. And two, that there could be like kind of they could be around for years and years. So if your value, or if something that you're really interested in is connecting with a person that you're flirting with or that you're dating, how can you get creative and do that in a way where it's not potentially, going to put you at risk? And like, of course, like there's not a way, I think that there's going to be risk associated with a lot of different behaviors. But maybe thinking about like saying, I'm just not comfortable sending a picture where I don't really know what you're going to do with that picture, in a couple of years. Can we figure out a different way for you and I to feel connected, or for you and I to explore, this relationship with each other? So really thinking about what are the things that you're really comfortable with, and how can you have that open and honest conversation? And of course, again, I know that it's much easier to say that, for me to say that in this setting than to actually do that in your relationships. But again, that's where I encourage you, to check out those other resources, and also to feel free to call Interact if you want to have, a further conversation about this. Talk to the people that you trust in your life as well. So I think, at what age should children be allowed to have access to phones? Being that it's so dangerous, I don't know that I fully agree that, phones are always dangerous. I think that they can be a great way for people to make community, and to, be connected, especially in a time, especially in a pandemic, or especially, when we're disconnected from each other in other ways. I do just think that it's important to talk openly and honestly with children about what potential risks might be, and just to kind of maintain that conversation with them about knowing what their own values and boundaries are. Being able to say, is something happening online that's making you feel uncomfortable? Talking to them about knowing what to do if that does happen. So having something in place, where you might say, hey, I'm happy to set you up with this video game. If you are playing live with people, I need you and I to have an agreement that you're going to tell me if someone's saying something that's inappropriate. Or, do you know what to do if someone's saying something inappropriate? Checking in with them about saying, like, what is the feeling in your body that you get when someone does something that hurts your feelings? How can you help them build some awareness about what happens when their boundaries are getting crossed? And then, as a parent, be ready to have a safety plan in place with them.
What other questions do we have? And Haley, that's a great question. Just so y'all know, the phones that are set up for children where it has restricted numbers, I found out from a student you can hack those. So just because you think the child can only call 2 or 3 people, there's a way to actually bypass that. So don't 100% trust that child-friendly phone. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm not seeing anything in the chat. If anybody else has a question, let us know, and then we will start wrapping up. And don't forget, by the way, that Interact, and Bex, thank you so much, but y'all need to understand, Interact is an amazing resource for all of our students and really our whole community. So maybe you're not comfortable putting it in the chat. You can definitely call them, contact them, connect with them, because they have done so much more than I can even tell you because of privacy for students, and have been an absolute, lifesaver for so many. So don't hesitate. And if it's something where you're not sure, then ask. That's why they're there. They are the experts in this area, and you really want to utilize this resource. So if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and cheat and put in Paige just real quickly. The Student Government Association has 80 books of Know My Name. And I mentioned this last week. This is the Chanel Miller book. And I have asked our wonderful tech guru, Sarah Rose, to put the sign-up link in the chat. And it's so important because they will be giving 80 copies away. This is a case you may have heard of. In 2015, a young woman was unconscious. She was raped by Brock Turner on the campus at Stanford. And so that is this book, because everybody talks about the case, but they don't talk about what happened to the victim after. And so this is her story of survival, of rebuilding herself. and moving forward, despite him getting a, sorry, my personal opinion, an almost non-existent sentence. And so if you're interested, they're giving them away as part of Denim Days at the end of the month. And I really encourage you to do that. They have not only these books, but they will have with it some marvelous limited edition Promise Day swag, because we weren't able to see you in person. So we gave them swag bags that they could give out with these, and they've been a great supporter of Promise Day. So Bex, thank you so much. And Paige, I'm going to let you take over.
Yeah, I just wanted to extend a few more thank yous. Thank you so much, Bex, for just representing Interact, and for the wisdom that you've shared here today. I think that it's powerful to think about how much we learn from each other, from stories like in the book that Professor McElvaney was just sharing, but just as well in this kind of informal setting. You know, how much we can learn from each other and empower each other to build those healthy relationships. So we also wanted to just extend a big thank you to all of our campus resources as well. So the Wellness Campus Police and the Title IX investigators that you heard from earlier, as well as Laura Bethay and the whole Title IX office. Claire and I in particular, this is work that's really near and dear to our hearts. So we are so grateful that all the campus and community resources have gotten together with us here to share lots of information with you. And we're grateful to you for joining the conversation. Thank you for all the ways in which you participated in the presentation by Interact as well, with Chloe and with Neha. We're just grateful to build this community together and to have this conversation. And did I leave anything out, Claire? Oh, I think she disappeared for just a second, but a big thank you. And Claire, I was just saying, if I left anyone out, please feel free.
No, and I'm sorry, I touched the computer. I know better than to touch the computer. But thank you, Sarah Rose, because for those who don't know, Sarah Rothman Rose, who is behind this the whole time, and I know we've mentioned her a couple of times, but we can't mention her enough, because we couldn't do anything if she didn't run all of this. And she, for the record, put up with us long before COVID. And so a lot of times people go, oh, it's a tech person. Let me tell you, those tech people run the world. Sarah Rose runs us, and we are so grateful for it. But we're also thankful to Wake Tech, to, you know, our department head Kim Eaton, et cetera, because so many people, Kim, Tori, Dean Beck, et cetera, have given us full support, and we're so grateful. So if you don't know, the biggest thing about Empowering Eagles is building a better community and asking and letting us know what you want. So if there's something you're interested in seeing for, say, domestic abuse awareness in fall, please let us know, because we want to get the information that you need or that your friends need. And so just keep that in mind. There's so many resources out there. Don't let anything derail your successful future. And I think that's it. We good?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Bex, and to your wonderful peer supports at Interact. Everybody's awesome. Thank you so much.